I'm Rebecca Murphy. I'm a staff software engineer at Bizarre Voice in Austin, Texas. I actually used to live in North Carolina, in Durham, North Carolina. These are some of the highlights of my road trip from Durham, North Carolina. This is the Walmart that I stopped at to buy a windshield wiper. This is why I bought a windshield wiper. And this is what my dog thought of the trip, which took 3 days to get from North Carolina to Austin, Texas. So she was a good sport. But it's good to be back in North Carolina 6 months later. It's a little soon. It's like, oh, this wasn't such a bad place after all, was it? But no, I live in Austin. I work at Bizarre Voice. Bizarre Voice does, we do all kinds of things. Like, I can say very simply, we do ratings and reviews for brands and retailers on the internet. And you're like, that's cool. Stars and comments, like, how hard can that be? It's actually hard and fascinating, and the quantity of data that we're dealing with is like, so it's a pretty cool place. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we do, not to sell you on it, but just to like tell you it's pretty neat. What I want to talk about today, though, is third-party JavaScript. How many people know what that is? All right, how many people are using third-party JavaScript on their site right now? Keep your hands up. How many people are using Google Analytics on their website right now? Oh, yeah, you should have had your hands up the first time. Or if you're using Discuss, or if you're using embedded tweets, or if you're using Share This, or the Facebook like button, you can put your hands down now. You're cool. You're good. Thanks. I can ask more questions when you just get all the hands up in the room eventually. But so yeah, when I talk about third-party JavaScript, I'm not talking about third-party libraries like jQuery or Backbone or Underscore. We're going to set those aside as a separate topic. Those are usually, or at least often, libraries that are A, open source, and so clearly vetted by the community, and B, usually you're hosting those or have control over where they're being hosted, or they're being hosted on a CDN that you really can trust. And so we're not talking about that. What we are talking about is things like Google Analytics, which you get on your page by adding this little snippet of code, right? You put a script tag, and this script tag actually inserts another script tag, which I didn't dig into it, but it probably inserts another script tag that inserts another script tag, makes some requests, makes some posts, some cross domains, and all sorts of crazy things. Same with embedded tweets. I don't know how many people do this, but this is one I kind of dug into to just see how it worked and see what it did. Same with embedded tweets, same with share this or add this. Probably no one does add this anymore because that was like from the days of Stumble Upon, right? Who remembers that? Am I old? Okay. In Discuss, or Discus, as I think it's actually written, but you call it Discuss because it's about comments, is another example of third-party JavaScript. These guys actually literally wrote the book on third-party JavaScript. And the reason I'm talking about this today is we too, at Bizarre Voice, use third-party JavaScript to get our ratings and reviews application onto a website. So, true story, if you go on Target.com right now and go read the reviews for something, they are there because of code that my team works on and that Target puts in their page. They put a script tag in their page, they put a little bit of configuration code in their page, and they get ratings and reviews on their page for their entire product catalog. They just say, hey, this is product 1. And from those like 5 lines of code, we generate this rich client-side experience in the end user's browser. So third-party JavaScript is all over, and the crazy thing is it's super scary. It is nuts. This is basically a fundamental security flaw in the architecture of how this web thing works that lets us do these things. This is a quote from my friend Alex, who actually wrote the kind of preliminary version of the application that I work on at Bizarre Voice now. He's basically saying, like, this was a mistake, and it's really cool that they made this mistake because it's made for a really rich and beautiful internet. But this mistake means that if someone gets a script tag on your page, there is nothing they can't do. Like, super scary. So I summarize this as this. And it's totally totally true. So, like that's, when you put a script tag on your page from a domain that you don't control, like Chris, he doesn't let you do that in CodePen, because like that would be crazy if you did that in CodePen. So when you do it on a domain, when you do it on a page you do control, but from a domain that you don't control, the things that you can do are, that script can do, you may not really realize. So let's look at the embedded tweet example, because this is one that we can kind of all understand and wrap our brains around. So if you look at Twitter's embedded tweet app, you click that little ... thing, and the embed tweet link comes up, and you click it, and you get this code snippet in the, I thought this was, I didn't go looking for this picture, it was just in my feed at the time, but I was like, hey, in 1921, early suffragettes wore bathing suits and ate pizza to piss you off. So you get this snippet of code, and it's like, oh, that's just HTML, that's cool. So it's a block quote with some metadata in it and the actual tweet itself. And then the money part here is the script tag itself. So the script tag says, hey, go get this JavaScript from some domain, like, you don't own twitter.com, unless you do, and like, cool. But like, you don't own twitter.com, Twitter owns twitter.com, and so you go get this script tag from twitter.com. And so block quote, script tag. When you put that script tag in your page, this fires off 7 requests to 3 different hosts with 3 different DNS lookups. That picture, like, throws things off a little bit. The picture itself is 43K. It's black and white and like not that big, so probably doesn't need to be 43K, but that's another story. But 107 minus 43 is, anyone? 64. Math is hard. I actually, like, when I did that math the first time, like, it took me way longer than 0 milliseconds to come up with that answer. So 64K, aside, never mind the picture, we'll just, like, ignore that part. 64K, that's like almost 2 jQueries to get this tweet pretty on your page, right? And there's all, like, man, I could give a whole talk about all the things that Twitter is doing in a less than ideal way here. For example, the fact that they're sending this 30K payload rather than sending a smaller initial payload and then a larger secondary payload. If you want to go read about TCP slow start and how that affects your front-end performance, fascinating topic. Paul Irish gave a good talk about that at Fluent and at the front-end ops conference. So there's a whole lot that they could be doing better here. But bottom line, 63K, lots of requests, lots of domains. Never mind all that, though. One of the things that they do is, and you can't see this, it doesn't matter. One of the things that they do is post an analytics snippet of data to syndication.twitter.com. And in that post, they send all of Twitter's cookies, all of your Twitter cookies, like you the user, all of your Twitter cookies. So now, like, we know, Twitter knows that I was on your page. I don't know what your page was. Maybe your page was sketchy. Like, maybe I shouldn't be there, and maybe Twitter shouldn't know I was there. Now, Twitter knows that I was there. They have, that's my guest ID. If anyone wants to hack my Twitter account, they probably can now. And so these are all the cookies that are in my browser that are getting sent to Twitter. So not only, like, here's what we've learned, is when you add a third-party JavaScript script tag to your page, you don't really know what it does next, like how many requests it's going to make and from where, because it can start adding all kinds of things to your page, and generally does. That's how third-party JavaScript applications work. But also, we'll talk in a minute about all the access that it has to what's going on your page, but also it can make requests to domains that you don't control. So it is a first-class citizen in that it can operate, like, it doesn't have any cross-origin restrictions as far as making requests to endpoints that are on your server. But it also, through the magic of cross-domain messaging and terrible gross hacks, can make requests, including post requests to other domains that you don't control, such as syndication.twitter.com. Obligatory sniffle. Sorry. So let's take a look at a couple of other things that this can do. This is going to be some magical, like, unmirroring and hitting escape and hitting option F1 and flipping to the browser. No, really, flipping to the browser. There we go. Okay. So, right. So third-party JavaScript, there's a couple different things that, there's of course, like putting a script tag on your page from a domain that you don't control. That's kind of the classic third-party JavaScript. Another kind of third-party JavaScript that you might not think of is JSONP. Who knows about JSONP? Why do we use JSONP? Go. Yes, so the answer is so we can get JSON. He's looking at me like, I told you to give him the microphone. So I asked the question, and the answer was we use JSONP so that we can get data from a different domain. Cool. How do we do that? Well, by adding a script tag to our page. So here, we'll load some JSONP. We're like, and here's the code that's going to run when I click this button, which I cleverly gave an ID of JSONP. This is going to go out and make a JSONP request to this URL. We specify the JSONP callback, like what we want to do with it when we're done. So we go out and we load this JSONP. Haha, LOL. So what we actually got back from the JSONP endpoint was, yeah, they called our callback because they're nice like that. And then they did something completely different that we didn't know that they were going to do. Now, if you trust your JSONP endpoint, then they probably won't do this. If you trust your JSON endpoint but you aren't using HTTPS, you really can't trust your JSONP endpoint. And so that's it. Like how JSONP works is by adding a script tag to the page. That's literally all it did was add a script tag. These were the contents. This is like this script executed. And so JSONP you should really think of as exactly the same thing. Let's load a resources? No. Where are you? Sources, right here in front of me. Let's load a third-party script. We set a cookie when this page loaded. We set a cookie of secret is trust no one. And so now we're gonna load some third-party code, not the JSONP. We'll load something else from evil.com because it seems legit. So we'll load this third-party script, and look, let me zoom in so you can see. They changed our cookie. They read it, and they changed it out from underneath us. Seems bad. Let's enter a credit card number. So we're just going to enter a credit card number here. We've loaded our third-party JavaScript. Not my real credit card number, just so you know. And that third-party JavaScript just saw what I entered into that form and could have just posted it to a completely different domain. Cool. Pretty neat. Right, so, nope, I need my notes, Mac is like, let me think about whether I want to show your presentation anymore. Right, so once again, third-party JavaScript is consensual XSS. When you are granting someone permission to be on your page via a script tag or via JSONP, which is just a script tag, you really need to trust them. So we covered that. I should put that earlier. It's just in general rules. Don't trust people. Like, don't. I shouldn't say that because, like, I make money because you trust Bizarre Voice and pay us money to show ratings and reviews. But be judicious about who you're trusting. Third-party JavaScript is often a really easy way to get something on your page, like an embedded tweet. But there are other ways to get that content on your page that you might want to consider. Async is super important. Twitter did a good job with making sure that all of the resources that they're loading are async, and so they aren't blocking your page. If you see any third-party JavaScript that is doing any document write, like get the F off your page. You'll see that a lot with ads, but I think even once upon a time, Google Analytics that's how they got in the page. Like lots of scripts were doing that, and probably lots still are. So document write is horrible. Like there's nothing more to say about it. That was an argument that used to have to go into in more detail a few years ago, but not so much now. It's just blocking and bad. But do understand the risks of what you're doing, like the risks that you're incurring by bringing these other resources onto your page, and can you trust the vendor? And it's not always about like the vendor operating in good faith. Your vendor, whoever's giving this to you, is probably always operating in good faith, but did they screw up too is another, did they screw up, and who has access to their code and their resources? And finally, HTTPS all the things, because if you aren't, then you don't actually know that script is coming from Twitter. Probably coming from Twitter, but you don't know that it's coming from Twitter unless you're HTTPSing. I just saw a tweet this morning about how some like super important person at Symantec was like, yeah, we only HTTPS when it really matters. And it's like, that's all the time, basically now. There's like, thankfully Facebook and Twitter and Gmail and all them are on that bandwagon now. So at Bazaar Voice, like I just kind of alluded to, third-party JavaScript pays my salary. And so we're a third-party JavaScript creator, and now that I have sufficiently scared you of using third-party JavaScript, you can probably imagine that we have to make super sure that you aren't scared to use us, and that you as a website owner are comfortable putting us on your page and knowing that we aren't going to break you. So one of the things that we do, of course, is we provide an HTTPS option. Honestly, not enough of our customers use it. I wouldn't say most, but a significant chunk of our customers are probably still on HTTP and loading us via HTTP. So we support both, but we try to provide that as an option. It's totally not time to be done yet. Just, I want more time here. So if you couldn't hear on the audio, there were people clapping in the other room, and it's like, what? It's only 2:20. So we provide HTTPS, but as a creator of third-party JavaScript, there's kind of another set of rules that you have to follow. One of the hardest and most hardest and most fun parts of the job of working on third-party JavaScript is when you're writing code for your site, you got to make it work in IE whatever and Chrome and Safari and Firefox and mobile, and like not to knock that, like that's a hard problem in and of itself, right? We have to work on Target.com and on some like fairly tiny little retailer who doesn't necessarily have a huge budget for making good decisions when it comes to JavaScript. And honestly, some of the big retailers have a huge budget. That doesn't mean they make good decisions when it comes to JavaScript and web development. And so the challenge of working everywhere so that one piece of code will work on any customer who comes to us with money is fascinating. And not only does it have to work on all the customers, it has to work. And we actually only go back to IE8, and knock on wood, that'll end someday soon. We only work on IE8, Safari, Chrome, Firefox, Android 4, iOS, N and N-1, and only Safari on iOS, I think. Anyway, so not only does it have to work on all those browsers, but it also has to work on all those browsers on any web page. Maybe they set their doc type wrong. Maybe they loaded 6 different jQueries. Maybe they loaded jQuery and YUI and Dojo, 2 different versions. Maybe they maybe they messed with natives. Maybe they messed with the array prototype. Maybe, who knows? You don't really know what they might have done. So you have to work everywhere, and part of working everywhere is bringing your own everything. We have customers all the time who are like, we've got jQuery on our page. Why do you need your own? Sorry, I was trying to avoid that. We've got jQuery on our page. Why do you need your own? Just use ours. Well, a couple things. Number one, we can't trust your jQuery. What have you done to it? Is it really the version that it says it is? Like, this is a weird thing about JavaScript that you can just muck with these kind of common libraries. And indeed, we have to muck with these common libraries, our versions of these common libraries, in order to solve customer problems. We have a custom jQuery that we maintain. And you're like, why don't you just submit a patch back to jQuery? They don't want it. You don't want this in the jQuery that you use. Trust me, you do not want this. And ditto with Backbone. We have a custom Backbone that we maintain. You don't want, like, we had to remove things that Backbone supports because we don't want that support. And if we had that support built into our Backbone, then certain customers' websites could break us. So we have to bring our own everything when we show up. While you're bringing your own everything, which is like 85K, you still have to be fast. And you don't want me to put, I don't want me to put our network diagram up on a slide deck and like make fun of it and tell you about all the things that we could fix. So being the fastest thing on the page and understanding things like TCP slow start and caching and using CDNs effectively and expiring caches and versioning and scout files and this and that. It's a whole other, again, because you have to work everywhere, the stakes are different and higher. And especially with an application like Bazaar Voice, we're dealing with, we're on e-commerce sites, right? And we all know how Amazon discovered like 100 milliseconds has a non-trivial impact on the conversion rate of a page. And so our customers demand that we be fast, especially in that context. Probably less important for an embedded tweet, probably. But for things like ratings and reviews, or even potentially comments, you don't want to be slow. And finally, you have to tolerate something that you can't, like, there's no other way to describe it except insanity. So that's what I want to kind of finish up with here. We'll see how many of these we get through. Got about 20 minutes left, but now we do that whole flipperoo again. Pardon the sniffling, it's just part of my life. Yes, I took my allergy medicine, it doesn't matter. Right, so this was a fun one. Every one of these was fun. Every one of these was like some level of panic attack at work when this is happening. So this is a fun one where we had this widget that either the customer could say, put it in the div with this ID, or if I don't specify an ID, put it in the default div. So that's what's going on here. We're going to click. There's these two different show it buttons. The first show it button passes in a, like, I want you to put it in this div. The second show it button doesn't pass in a configuration, so we expect our code to fall back to the default div. So we click the show it and put it in the configure div, and like, cool, it shows up in the configured div. We click show it without any configuration, and the code executed, but there's nothing in the page. And we'll reload just so you can see that like it didn't end up, like there's nothing got added to the page. And you read the code, and it's like, it's pretty cool, it works, should work. What the heck's going on here? Who knows what's going on here? You don't have the microphone, so you don't have to answer. Clinton knows what's going on here.
So when you add content container ID, which is undefined, to your string, it casts to a string.
Boom. Right. So config.container ID is undefined, and it gets coerced into a string because JavaScript, and so. But we have this like, we're checking to make sure that this actually exists. And like, who the hell put in div with an ID of undefined on their page? Google Analytics did. If your Google Analytics is, Now, I think it was only if your Google Analytics was misconfigured, then it didn't put a div on the page with an ID of undefined. It put a script tag on the page with an ID of undefined. And so now you're trying to change the HTML of a script tag, and like, good luck with that. And so yeah, like, that was fun when that happened. But these are the kinds of like things that, and this, I've been working at Bazaarbase for about 18 months now, and these are the kinds of things that you just don't think about these things. Like, you think you've got that check of like, if my div.length, like, cool. Aren't I a responsible coder? You never think that there's going to be a thing with an ID of undefined on your page, because that's nuts. But you don't own your page, and so you have to kind of be ready for anything. Speaking of things you don't think are ever going to happen, this was a cool one. So this is really simple. We click on write a review, prevent default, we append the submission form to the body. What can go wrong here, right? Well, you just saw what goes wrong there because I forgot to reload the page. There's 2 of them. Seriously? Like, how did that happen? And obviously, in our code base, there aren't just like 6 lines that make everything happen. There's a lot more than 6 lines. And so we dug and dug and dug and tried to figure out, like, what in God's name? Like, how is this? Where is our code running 2 times that this emit? Like, here's where we bound the event. And like, you click, like, and in our pages, like, we're like doing debugging and breakpoints, and it's like only running 1 time. There were 2 bodies on the page. And the second one was being added dynamically after the HTML loaded, but before our script, before the submission form got loaded. So we actually now have code in our app that defines a function, it defines a function called body that we can call that will return just the first body that we find. And anytime that we want the body, we can't just do, $body like a normal person. We have to actually, and we had to go through our whole code base and find all the places where we're referring to body and actually put in place this new module that would handle whoever thought that was a good idea. Speaking of good ideas, so who has ever used JavaScript to solve a problem that really your backend developer should have solved? Right? Like, don't lie. Like, everyone has used a problem, solved JavaScript. Their backend developer. If you've ever used Track, which is a bug management system, I completely re-customized the behavior of Track and added all of this cool stuff to it with jQuery at this one job. Because I was like, Python, that's scary. I think Track is in Python. I don't remember. Anyway, so this happened the day before I went on vacation. Always fun. We get urgent bug report from a customer who says, you guys are allowing script injection. Here, let me prove it to you. We write a review on our page. We click submit. And on a test page, we click submit. Once the review shows up, it has XSS in it, and like, here's the alert on the page. Like, you guys are allowing script injection. And I talked earlier about how important, I'm like getting goosebumps about this, because I talked earlier about how important trust is when it comes to third-party JavaScript libraries. And so if we were allowing script injection in our application, like, I don't deserve to have a job. And certainly, we, Bazaarbase, don't deserve to be getting money from anyone. So full on panic, and like we go to the page, we see it repro, like this is definitely happening, and like sleep was lost over this. So let's So like we couldn't find, once again, we like went through our code, we wrote some tests that hadn't been written to prove that prove that everything was working as it should be, prove that HTML was being escaped before it was put into the page, and we were really stuck as to why this was happening. We did some debugging, so we found that when we insert our content into the page, we properly escape it, and so you end up with like what you see here. You end up with what looks like a script tag on the page, but it's escaped. The less than is an ampersand LT, and right? Like it's all properly escaped. But then it turns out that the customer was running this code that was actually causing our properly escaped script tags to come to life. What? And like these are the sorts of things like, so yeah, that was absolutely happening, and this was the code. Do you notice what else changed on this page aside from the fact that there's now a code editor there? See how that little R got a little smaller and popped up? They wrote code in JavaScript rather than on the server to wrap that registered mark in a soup tag, S-U-P. And the code that they wrote, while it was busy doing that, also had the effect of replacing this with this was revivifying those script tags. It was taking those escaped script tags, running this replace on them. Of course, the replace didn't match anything. Running this replace on them, sticking the result back in the page, and this.node value actually pulled out not the ampersand less than semicolon. It actually pulled out a less than, and so I got to go on vacation. I got to keep my job, and it wasn't our fault. And that was lots of the first couple of things that I talked about are ones where we changed something. We were like, oh, I'm going to have to write a module to figure out which body is the real body. This was one where it's just like, good luck with that, dude. We told them this is not us, and there's literally nothing that we can do to save you from this. Don't do that, and then this won't happen. Fix this on the server. So that was fun. Last one I want to show you. This one's fun because I always, when I was working on it, I would work on it and I would go to reload it and I would be like, it's not reloading. My computer's frozen. What's going on? So you can imagine that this is a product page. It's like, Adam's Amazing Widget, $29.99, some details about it, and then you're like, I want to find out more. So you click Show Details on this, and it's like, it has bells and whistles. Did you already buy it? Write a review. And you're like, cool, let me write a review. Typing, right, nothing's coming up. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to reload. Nope, not going to reload either. What the what? This was a case, again, true story, where a customer was actually, the Dojo library has a widget in it for modals, for light boxes, right? And I don't know if there's a setting or if it's just the default or what, but when you, for accessibility purposes, bless Dojo's heart, they are like this amazing library when it comes to having accessible widgets. For accessibility purposes, once this modal pops up, if it's truly a modal, you don't want people interacting with what's behind the screen, then it actually blocks key presses and just doesn't listen to anything that happens anywhere except inside that modal. So these guys open a Dojo modal that had a button in it. You click the button, and you're allowed to click the button because it's listening to what's happening inside of it. They didn't close the modal once our modal opened, and so their modal was still like, you may only type in me. And so not only key presses are just dead on the page right now if they're not happening inside of that one modal. So again, that was a case where we had to say, there's nothing we can do we talked about it. We were like, how can we bust ourselves out of this terrible, horrible situation that we're in? But it was actually like this was an event. The event was being prevented up at the document level. There was really no way for us to say, no, don't do that thing. So this was another case where we had to tell the customer, just close your modal. Our modal will work afterwards. So now I have to actually close this tab because there's no other way. No other way to get out of it. Right. Command F1. Wait. Option Apple P. Wait. Why? I screwed up. Did it wrong. Right. So that's what I've got. If you are interested in this, and this is just, it's like third-party JavaScript is a way to really take your JavaScript game to this whole other level, and also open your mind to all these crazy things that you could be doing, especially when it comes to like cross-domain messaging. So being able, you're on this page and you're posting something, like the whole way that our application works is once you type in your review and you click submit, we send a post to api.bazaarvoice.com, not to the page that you're on. And we do that using the EasyXDM library. And once you realize that you can do that, you're like terrified and amazed at what you can do. So if you're interested in this, these are Ben Vinegar and Anton Gavalyev, both used to work at Discuss. I think they've both moved on now. But they did literally write the book that is the handbook for how you do this, how you create a third-party JavaScript application. And they also talk a lot about just as a consumer of a third-party JavaScript application, things that you might want to know. I also have the links, some links, including to the book and to some other talks that are kind of relevant to this topic. There's also a fun link to like 180 ways that people can XSS you on the OWASP site. That was pretty neat to discover last night. And yeah, so check those out. I might add some more things to it. There's also a link to the repo that has the examples in it if you want to poke around and see how poorly I wrote code for the sake of a presentation. So yeah, I'm Rebecca. I work at Bazaar Voice. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on the internet. I don't really write much there. But I have a couple minutes left, so this is the time when I say, if you have questions, wait for the microphone. Does anyone have questions?